So, Barbara, what's the difference between someone who is an artist and someone who isn't?
That is a huge question. I think it has to do with how you see the world and what you do with those things that you see. Are you going to try and express them and share them with people? Or are you just going to keep them for yourself?
Sounds like the shift is you recognizing that you want to communicate with people through your work and then taking that seriously as a creative and professional identity.
Well, I can remember sitting in the barnyard at my aunt and uncle's house, looking at the view across the marsh, the Tantramar marshes, and I don't remember what was going on, but they came and said, oh, Barbie, come here and do this and that. And I said, oh, I'm not finished yet. And I just sat there. I was oblivious while I was doing the work. And when I stood up, I had mosquito bites all over the backs of my thighs, but I hadn't felt a thing. And I think that was really the moment because I was in the zone, and I went back to the zone after that many times, doing different artwork and different projects.
Hello and welcome to the latest Vieunite Art in Focus podcast. I'm joined today by Barbara Safran de Niverville, one of our fantastic Vieunite featured artists. Barbara, hi.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm coming from Riverview, New Brunswick, a town in Eastern Canada. So we're pretty close to the countryside here. I'm a landscape artist, and in the last few years, I've become very interested in looking at things more closely than looking at big vistas and great views and long views of rolling hills and things like that. I've concentrated very much on my local environment. In fact, the two paintings behind me are based on things I've seen out the window over here. Our house is a drop back, so on the main floor we are level with the tree branches, and we can see the squirrels and the birds and that sort of thing. And it was really during the pandemic that I started going closer with my camera, walking in vacant lots, finding wild growth in a more urbanized environment. My favorite vacant lot on the main drag of Riverview, had a family of foxes living in it, a little mini marshland, lots of wildflowers. It is now a 5-story condo complex in just a few years.
And you're capturing it before it changes too much.
Yes, I'm walking farther and farther away to wild spaces in the middle of housing developments, and I'm finding them.
So let's take a look at the first piece of art we're going to talk about today. This is Evening Sail, Shediac. It sounds like Shediac must be the name of a resort somewhere.
Well, it's the name of the town. It was originally mostly a fishing village, and it became more of a beach resort town more recently, the last 20, 30 years. And my husband's family had a cottage there right by the beach, so we used to go in the summertime, and I could walk down the lane, sit on an undeveloped beach, and paint the sunset while people were sailing and using their windsurfers. And it was a beautiful, fun spot to paint, and I go out every night just around sunset and do sketches. I've sold an awful lot of those watercolors. The one on that I sent you is one that I kept for ourselves.
Wonderful. And so when did you make this piece of work?
I would say it was probably about the late 1980s. I don't really have a date marked on it. I wasn't as organized with my record keeping in those days. I had two young children, and we were very busy while we were at the cottage, and sometimes we would just come for the day, but I got more organized later.
No, that's that. Yeah, I mean, the artist's archive is really important. But this is an early piece of work from you.
Relatively speaking, I mean, my BFA was in 1977. All this was plein air, sitting there with the paints. And eventually I got to the point where I was doing more involved thematic work. I did a whole series of the Petitcodiac River, which is the river between Riverview and Moncton. And it's a tidal river with a tidal bore. And it was very interesting. They were going to open the water gates and let the river be back to nature where it had been clogged up with a sort of like dam that they could open, but they didn't open it. It was supposed to let the fish through. It didn't. So I painted it before they opened the water gates, and I painted it afterwards, and I had several shows around Moncton. And then I said to myself, well, this was interesting. People would look at the paintings and say, in French, they'd say, oh, c'est joli, it's pretty. And then they'd move on, like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. And I thought, I can do better than that. I want to put more depth in my work and engage people a lot longer. And that was really what led me to start on the Master of Fine Arts degree. And I was lucky I had the time I could do it. I had the opportunity. So.
And where did you do that?
I went to the Art Institute of Boston, and it was a great program for me. Introduced me to all kinds of contemporary art, and I came out of the MFA doing a lot of different work and a lot more experimentation with materials and so forth. Always landscape.
So this first piece of work, that's like typical of the earliest part of your career. And when I look at that and some of your other watercolors, I see, well, I think partly it's because of the medium, but I see traces, hints of people like Turner.
Yes, I was fortunate to study Turner's small sketches. When he went to a place in Europe, he would take a small sketchbook, maybe 2 by 3 inches, 3 by 4 inches with him, and a few colors and some inks, and he would sketch from life. And they are so vibrant and so amazing with only 3 or 4 different colors of ink and maybe a pen and a little brush, just to know what to leave out to evoke a feeling of the landscape. It was really instructive. The first place I went to see them was the British Museum. I went to England in 1982, and I had written for permission, so I was able to, in the reading room, I think it was, and they brought me great big boxes of huge mats with the tiny drawing or painting in the middle, and there were attendants around to make sure you didn't get too close. Looking down, they come over. Oh, okay, I got too close. And they allowed me to do a little sketching with colored pencils, no water things and no ink. So I was able to do some little thumbnails of some of Turner's more interesting sketches. And then when I went back...
They let you handle them yourself?
Well, just the mat board. I couldn't touch... If my hands got anywhere near, they'd be on me instantly. So I was very respectful of the opportunity and careful. And I think they even discussed it with me ahead of time, how to... be safe at looking at them and not cause any problems.
I can picture the scene. So I imagine you're wearing a pair of white gloves.
It seems to me I did. I don't remember exactly. I think they supplied them, which was very smart on their part. I wouldn't have brought them with
I'm sure
me.
they did. So I've handled Edvard Munch's prints in the British Museum as well, and I know the setup you're describing, the kind of the drill. Show your passport. They check you out. There's a little conversation. Is this person for real? They have a genuine interest, and then here are your gloves. Don't touch the artwork. It's all very, but it's amazing to be able to handle something that's been made to be so close to something, so unmediated.
You're so close to it. There's no glass in between you and the artwork, and you're seeing the true colors, not in a book or in a slide somewhere.
So Turner was an early influence.
Yes, definitely.
And then when you're doing your MFA, things kind of shifted.
It was good. It was really what I needed. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things, very stimulating. And part of the program was that it was emphasized to us to go to New York and see the galleries there and really immerse ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I made 2 trips to New York, and I also had one mentor who was in Brooklyn. So one of the trips was in conjunction with the mentor. And I have 2 daughters, so I brought one daughter with me on each trip, and we had a great time going around Chelsea. They have First Thursday or something like that, and all these galleries. It was a whole building full of art galleries, all open, and people just tramping from one to the other. It was really quite amazing.
So what you're describing is a kind of opening up of your practice from something that was maybe quite traditional in some ways and quite local to
Yes.
being connected with the global contemporary art world and
Definitely.
sort of
And
embracing those influences and bringing those back into your work. So let's have a look at another piece of your work now. Let's see where you ended up. Let's see where it shifted to. So should we go to Dawn or Dusk?
Yes, working quite large. For me, it was big, 3 feet by 4 foot panels on natural wood, using the wood grain and the color as a background to my pastel work and acrylics, which was a technique I developed since the MFA. And I had one morning I woke up having had a very visual dream where I was standing on a hill looking across a small valley to a hillside with wild saplings and trees, and the sun was setting down behind, illuminating the branches that had had rainfall on them with little tiny gems of water that were refracting the light. And it gave me such a feeling of joy and peace and comfort during the dream that when I woke up, I decided I was going to try and capture that image and work with it in a painting. And I realized that the trees I was looking at in the dream are the trees between our property and our neighbors. So I started working with some drawings first. I did a drawing on black paper because of it being dusk and getting darker, and the tree branches were all very black looking. So I did that. And then I did another pastel drawing on paper. In preparation, I had started working at 3 by 4 feet, and all of a sudden I was kind of lost. So I went back to paper with colored pencils and I worked it out. And then I went back to my panel with some very transparent Payne's gray. Actually, it wasn't even black, and working with the shapes, the main shapes, the color, the light and the dark. This is also a traditional way of doing it, starting out with your dark and light pattern and adding color. And as I was working on it, I realized that the drops of water were turning into things that looked like fireflies, which I had also seen in our backyard in that spot. So it became more of a magical, emotional expression than describing a certain moment in time, which is what I'd been doing before with my work. I'd been documenting things. And after the MFA, I started concentrating more on how do I show this feeling of peace and wonder. And I was amazed when I showed this work in a series of other things that were related to it. People were saying things like to me, it's magical. And then I had comments in my book, for the visitors to the gallery. One person wrote, "This show made my day. I love dawn or dusk." And I felt that that was what I was aiming at all along, to have that kind of response. And I also saw people standing and looking at it for quite a long time, which is another one of my objectives when I started the MFA. Engage people a lot more. Keep them there longer, thinking about the work. And I succeeded after all that study and experimentation. But it doesn't always work, so I'm still working on that. It's a great objective.
It's a never-ending quest, I think, for every artist. And so as you've been talking about it, I've got the impression that there's a combination of different kinds of attention that you synthesize into the artwork. So there's primary observation and things that you remember. Then there are maybe things that you see and that you draw. And then there is the use of photography. And in the case of this particular work, the whole of those influences are sort of synthesized through sleep, through dreaming.
Yes. And now I'm working more with a dreamlike approach as I'm working on a painting. And the panel starts to have a life of its own, and it starts to go in a certain direction. And I seem to emphasize the dreamlike aura, but that's kind of how I feel. For instance, the painting behind me here, Misty Morning, I have seen the mist in the backyard through the trees, the wonder and the peace of looking at the trees through the early morning fog or mist. And the colors, I started to use very intense pastel colors, which have been really great. Sometimes I have problems controlling them, but for instance, these two paintings behind me have several greens and yellows and blues that are considered fluorescent in my set of pastels. And I must say this one, Greening Spring, behind me is extremely difficult to photograph, and I think it's because of the fluorescent yellow and fluorescent spring green, but it certainly expresses that early greenish mist over the trees as the new leaves come out, and that effect only lasts a couple of weeks usually here. But the whole neighborhood is filled with this beautiful pale green mist on the branches, and then it develops into the darker, heavier foliage. So these are things that I try to capture in a more generalized, universal way and keep that sort of dreamlike wow factor going instead of I can get really wound up in details, even the photography when I draw on it on top of the print just to work up something.
Yeah, let's talk about your relationship with photography, because it's a really important part of your practice, and
Yes.
It's something that I think you've done for a very long time.
I was about 8 years old when my father gave me a Brownie camera for my birthday, and I had grown up at his elbow in his basement darkroom while he developed black and white photos for his art practice. He was an illustrator and portrait artist, and he worked in black and white. He was very good at capturing great black and white photos. He had a Rolleiflex camera, and I found it very magical standing by his elbow, watching the image develop from just blank paper and a little tiny bit of light through a negative, and all of a sudden he'd be moving it in the tray. And he decided that I should get my own camera, and then we developed the photos together.
What an amazing early education. And you've carried on using photography really throughout your life. So how do you tell me about the literally walk us through how you take a photograph that then feeds into the creative process of making something like Dawn or Dusk?
Well, I love digital photography because I can take any number of pictures I want right away until I get the effect that I'm looking for. And sometimes I will take, for instance, standing in the window here at dawn, it changes every minute. So I can take many pictures, and then it is important which photo I will select to work from that really gives me something to start with that I want to develop a lot more. And when I took film pictures, traditional pictures, I was much more abstemious about taking a shot. So I would spend a lot of time trying to get that right and take the pictures, and then we would develop them. And I think I really took off with it on my first visit as a teenager to New Brunswick. I had been to Canada with my family before because my mother's family was from here. But when I came here at the age of 16, I went by myself, and my cousin Lori was wonderful. She was 3 years older, just like an older sister. And we went all over the place in the area. My aunt and uncle lived on a farm. My uncle retired to this sort of hobby farm, and Lori and I went all over, and I took many pictures, and I also did watercolors, and I think that's when I became an artist.
And how old were you then?
16.
16.
And I mean, I always did art.
Now, if I've remembered correctly from the images that I've seen of your work, there's also a special kind of photography that you use to develop images, which is a kind of pinhole camera.
Yes, it's actually a pinhole body cap with a single lens reflex camera. You usually have a lens that you screw in or attach, and you have a body cap when you take the lens out that you put on to protect the camera. Well, this body cap has a hole as big as a needle, and that's why they call it a pinhole. And the pinhole gives you a very interesting, dreamy kind of photograph where everything is a bit out of focus, but it's all equally out of focus. And sometimes there are color distortions that are interesting. And my husband actually was the one who suggested I try it. He had one that he used for doing some video on his camera, and then I started to use one, and it was great because it gave me that dreamy look where details are kind of less important, and more important is the kind of mood that you have in the final picture. So I like the pinhole camera because it cuts out the minutia that I could get too involved with.
No, it's really interesting. So this body cap is it's the body cap for a digital SLR.
Yes, people, I went to a workshop. I belonged to a camera group at one point recently, the last few years, and we were in a beautiful garden, and I had my tripod set up, and my first digital camera SLR was about this big. So I had this great big tripod, this little camera, and then they sort of came and said, well, where's the lens? What are you doing? It's like, this is the lens. And then I showed them where you review your picture, and they said, oh, wow.
No, it's an amazing. I've never actually seen that before. I've seen analog pinhole cameras, but never seen a digital one before. It's a really interesting idea, and I think that. So is that what we're looking at when we look at some of the photographs that you shared with us? There's one of a sort of grass stalk with a droplet of water in it that you took from a photograph that's kind of pale green. Variety of pale greens, and there's this like dot of light, and then that went into a pencil drawing. Is that the kind of? Am I talking about the right thing? Is that a pinhole digital image?
It led up to the pinhole. I was actually playing with focus, out of focus, with a very low, like a f-stop that was very narrow, and the backgrounds and things in front would be blurred. And I could focus on a detail in front of me and blur the rest. And after I had done a whole series of photos in this vacant lot that was all overgrown and experimented with that, I started to try the pinhole camera lens, or the pinhole camera body cap. But I found that I really liked the pinhole the best. So. But often what I do is I take a regular picture that's all sharp, and I take the pinhole, because sometimes when I'm doing artwork that's larger than my photograph, I want to see a couple of details that I wouldn't have in the pinhole. So I don't always work from them, but I might refer back.
So again, you're synthesizing. You're synthesizing
Yes.
all the time from multiple sources. Some of which are designed to help you dream, and some of which are designed to give you facts, and you toggle between the two to get what you need in order to create the work that you're making.
That's a great description. And I'm also flirting with abstraction. It's not really abstract, but it's not super realistic, and I like that kind of intermediary zone to work in.
So what do you hope people get from looking at your work?
Well, I hope they feel relaxed and happy, and that they notice more what is going on in the natural world around them. I've been in different national parks where people were just sort of running and rushing up through the trails and missing all the wildflowers and the different features that were there, the rock textures and everything, and they were just interested in getting to the lookout as fast as possible and then running back down again. And I just thought, people, you need to spend a little bit more time looking. Some people just have very quick, and their lives are very fast moving, and I think they need time to just unwind, and I hope that my work helps them do that. And some of the feedback I've gotten seems to confirm it.
No, fantastic. It's such an important thing to do. I think we do lead very distracted lives with our attention's always being drawn somewhere else, to something else, and not to paying attention to where we are right now. It's a really important thing to do. So before we look at the final piece of work that we're going to talk about today, I'm going to ask you some quickfire questions. The first of these is, if you could collaborate with any artist, living or dead, who would it be and why?
I think I would like to spend some time with the American abstract expressionist artist Joan Mitchell. She had a very different way of working, but it's sort of the same idea as the sketches I went to look at by Turner. Her last painting series, the La Grande Vallée, she hadn't ever been to this place. She heard stories about it from her friend, talking about her friend's childhood, this special little valley. And Joan Mitchell produced 20 extraordinary, huge paintings that you would swear were the most beautiful garden, the most beautiful autumn trees. And again, with just wild brush strokes, a few colors, it's all there without a whole lot of detail. And then when I read that she hadn't actually been to the valley, I thought, well, this is kind of like what I'm working with the dreamlike approach, sort of living in your imagination more than a specific place.
It's a place you know, but a place you've never been to.
Yes.
Another thing I'd really like to ask you is, because a lot of people watching this will be quite young, aspiring artists. If you could give your young self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be to keep looking and keep learning and keep experimenting, which is kind of what I started doing later in life. When I did my BFA first, I was not very open to other kinds of art. I was kind of put off by a lot of contemporary art. I didn't understand it, although I must say it was in its infancy at that point. But I had to grow up more, be more mature.
So let's have a look at our last piece of your work. This is spring greening. Again, Barbara, could you describe what we're looking at, please?
Well, I mentioned already the early weeks of spring in this area. I used a photograph, 2 pinhole images that I montaged. I overlaid one over the other and printed it. I took part of the picture. My panel had a wood grain that looked the best going vertically, and my photograph was actually horizontal and landscape. So I just took a slice of the photograph, printed it, and then I worked on the color scheme because I didn't really like the colors that printed. And then I used the pastels, and that gave me something to start with on the panel. But as soon as I was using the fluorescent pastels, the panel started to take on its own aura, and it started to look like the spring green that I've always kind of wanted to explore. It only lasts a very short time, and all of a sudden it was starting to show up on this panel, so I just went with that idea, and using a lot of white, what do they call it, a pastel pot, which is pastel, but it's not in a stick, it's powder, and I was rubbing it on into the medium to kind of modify the strident colors that you can see in the drawing on the photograph.
There's something that I've noticed while we've been talking is that there's this like a huge amount of craft in what you do.
Well, I've always enjoyed working with materials, and it's something that I would miss a lot if I decided to concentrate only on digital work. I've tried different digital things, and I really do like that direct response between my hand and the materials and the substrate, whether it's paper or panel or whatever it is.
Yeah, because you from the watercolors through to the acrylic, then to the pastel, your modification of photography. So the image which you're looking at, spring greening, is pastel. Is that pastel over acrylic, or is it just pastel?
It's completely pastel and acrylic mediums and varnishes.
Hmm. And those are quite unusual combinations because, like, classically, pastel would be used maybe on Conte paper or um, something like that. And then it's less usual to see it then on top of other media or combined with other things. Certainly, I mean, you'll know much more about it than I do, but it seems to me to be fairly unusual the way in which you make work.
Well, I do use a special gesso on the wood. It's a transparent gesso that has a bit of a tooth to it so that when you do use pastel, it will hold it in place more or less. You do get a bit of powder dropping down on your easel shelf ledge, but it's quite good. And I did a lot of work with different kinds of acrylic mediums to figure out how to keep the pastel under the mediums. They change when you use the mediums. The medium colors of pastel can sometimes turn very dark when you add the medium over them. So sometimes I will do a test. For instance, I can show you right here. I think it's on this one.
Oh yeah, look at that. Right.
And I also try to make note of which photo I used because I always have many photos. I go back and say, which one? So I keep a little note on the back until I'm sure I don't need to refer to the original photo. But anyway,
Yeah.
with this one, I found it fairly easily.
Yeah. So you've gone from not dating your work, the beginning of your career, to being really diligent about recording not just when your work was made, but also the source imagery and so forth.
Well, I had a handbook. What was it? A Canadian artist handbook. And it was probably in the early 2000s that I ordered it. And it had how to set up your inventory spreadsheet so that it doesn't overwhelm you and how to keep track of things. And that was very helpful. So I tried to go back a bit, which I did in my inventory. So I have sometimes little gaps in my inventory here and there, but they're not too terrible. They're not
So it
too
sounds to
much
me
of a
like
problem.
the kind of learning points for aspiring artists watching this are like, first of all, pay attention. Secondly, learn to dream. And finally, keep a watertight inventory of your work. If you do those three things, you're probably doing quite well.
Yes, well, the watertight inventory is a bit sketchy, but we try.
So this last piece of work, spring greening, when was it made?
I would say January and February this year, 2025.
Mm-hmm. And so this points the way forward for us. We can expect to see more works like this from you, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll start to see more of them in the Vieunite Art Library so that people can enjoy them at home on their Textura canvas.
You will see more, and also with the lighter palette, I think they will reproduce better online. I didn't realize that during the pandemic, I was working with a lot of dark in my work, and it just sort of crept in. But I think I've gone beyond that now, and I'm working a lot more lighter. So that'll be something
Amazing.
to look forward to. Even my dawn pictures will not have heavy black in them anymore. So,
Right. So, Barbara, is there anywhere that our audience can go to see more of your work or connect with you online?
well, I have my website. My new website is barbsafranart.com, and they can send me email through the Proton email address that's on the new website.
We'll share those website addresses. And do you have? Are you on social media?
No, actually, I'm not, which is kind of unusual.
Have you got anything coming up that you would like to share or promote?
Well, I have something in the works, but I don't know if it's going to pan out. So at the moment, I'm just working on this new approach with the smaller panels, and contacting commercial galleries in Toronto. So that's where I'm at the
Well,
moment.
it's crossed, Barbara.
Yes.
And when you've got something to share with us, then drop us a line, and we'll help to do that for you. Because we love the work that you make, and it's terrific to see it in the Vieunite Art Library. And thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing those insights about how you make your work, what it means, where the inspiration comes from, and also lifting the lid on a fascinating technical process.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and it's always great talking about work. I learn some new things as I'm talking myself.